Hi, welcome to the Nano Blitz, a special social distancing video version. Sorry about my face being front and center since Tim is recording.
I'm in a box.
He's got a better face than I do, but I'm Nate, one of your hosts, and who's with me?
Well, this is Tim. You might remember me from such podcasts as the Nano Blitz episodes 1 through 18.
Okay. Well, today we're actually gonna kind of talk about Tim and I were fortunate enough to actually be able to participate in the Madden 21 beta. That's going to be our main focus kind of today, and we really wanted to kind of get together because this is the first time that both of us have actually been able to be part of the beta. They opened it up a lot, which is good. Allows small people like me to get involved in it. I guess I'm 5'11", but
I did it last year. I wasn't some kind of VIP. I just happened onto a code.
Yeah, I wasn't as lucky last year. I did try to do it last year. Tim was able to and whatnot. So hopefully we'll be able to have some insights on some of that. And then also maybe we're going to try to stay on topic the best that we can, but maybe talking about fix Madden franchise a little bit as well here today. So I'm going to let you start off here, Tim, because I'm really bad at doing that. I like to kind of get the caboose, so to speak, I guess.
Okay. You want to play off what I have to say? I got you.
Well, sometimes I have a different opinion of it, and so we can kind of contrast, but yeah.
All right, cool. I don't know if you'll have a different opinion than this because you didn't play it last year. But like that's the first thing I wrote down was this felt like last year, where I felt more capable of accomplishing things on offense and that defense was more challenging, right? I think by the end of the Madden 20 life cycle, which let's be honest, the end of the Madden 20 life cycle was November. But regardless, by the end of it, like now with my team built up and our franchise going strong, like I feel much better on defense in Madden 20. But last year when I was playing the beta, I was like, I don't know if I can play defense in this game. And it was a similar feeling. And I saw that a lot in a lot of the feedback from a number of people, whether they were playing different styles, playing versus head-to-head, or playing the CPU, which is what I was doing. It was pretty prominent that offense was the easier mode. Offense was it was, a lot of people think it's going to be easy to score in this game. And I think that might be true out the gate to a degree. Now, I had a few games where I couldn't score, but as a whole, I felt much more comfortable on offense. And then if I turned it over, it was because I made a mistake, I made a bad read, or I tried to do something that I couldn't. But offense just kind of felt more effective than what I was accustomed to playing with Madden 20. I think something that might play into all my feedback here is I think you also have to look at the teams that we were using. So you've got the Kansas City Chiefs, who won the Super Bowl. You've got Baltimore, who everybody thought was going to win the Super Bowl. You've got Tampa Bay, who suddenly is a Super Bowl considered contender. And then you've got Atlanta, who had the lowest rating but still played really well in the game, right? Which I think is a good sign. Like if I feel like I can beat Kansas City with Atlanta, then I think that's a good thing. But you look at all four of those teams, they all have MVP caliber quarterbacks who've been MVPs at some point in their career, right? Pro bowlers.
Mm-hmm. Actually, every single one of those quarterbacks has been an MVP.
Yeah. So when I looked at stuff like the QBs seems really accurate in this game. Like it was very rare that passes were like thrown to the wrong place. I only had one game where I threw an inaccurate pass that was notable to me. Like right now in Madden 20, if I throw an inaccurate pass with my quarterback, it's going to go 17 yards the other direction, right? That only happened to me once in all the games that I played, where my quarterback kind of just threw it to the defense instead of in the area. That's something I hope they can fine tune a little bit, where inaccurate passes are still close to receivers, but not necessarily always 10 yards away or right at a defender. But on average, the quarterbacks I played against were completing over 70%. So again, it could be because I struggled on defense. It could be because they're MVP quarterbacks. It could be because receivers felt like they didn't drop the ball as much. Like there were a lot more contested catches. And again, you can look at the teams that you have, right? So like the teams that were playing out there, you look at Tampa Bay, if they've got a superstar in the X Factor. Yeah. You got a superstar in the X Factor, and you got Gronk as a superstar. You know, like these guys were making big time catches. So I think that could have been a part of it. And then the other side of it too is the run game still feels really strong. Still feels really easy to run. You know, you can get big yards, you can break tackles, and it's on both sides of the ball. I know on defense it was fun playing against Tampa Bay, and I watched TJ Logan break 3 tackles, 2 in the backfield, to break out for a 40-yard gain. And I was like, wow, he did that effortlessly. And I think it was using Baltimore at the time, you know, so one of the better defenses on the game. So there was little things like that and these aren't complaints, I don't think. It was the feeling of the game. And I'm not sure in the long term, like, is that going to be enjoyable? Is it going to be more enjoyable? I think it's going to be more enjoyable than Madden 20 to play long term, depending on if they tune things one way or another. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm glad I have a different opinion of it than you, but hey,
well, you know. I want to hear your opinion of it then.
This is actually both of our first times actually finding out some of these opinions, other than a couple of texts that we've done, that kind of thing. But I actually found it harder to do offense because it is very different. I was still I could nickel and dime the defenses. I feel like that's a little bit easier to kind of get those 5-9 yard gains and just kind of boom, boom, boom. That kind of thing. That's really kind of at least what I felt in a methodical approach to it. Red zone was really interesting though, because the defenses are fast. I found in the red zone, linebackers cover better. But also on the inverse is I found drop-in coverage, not as much pass rush. Like you're not completely reliant upon pass rush. So I found defense actually, to me, a little bit more enjoyable, and I was shutting down teams. So it's completely opposite of what you had. Is I was struggling on some offense because I was trying some new things too. But, you know, like I'd make a stupid read or something like that in the red zone, and it'd be picked off by, you know, Devin White, who's effing awesome in the game, you know, like, or Jones, you know, for Atlanta, you know, those guys are fast and good, you know, so middle linebackers, I felt like, you know, I tend to control one of those either way. So, I was controlling either, you know, right outside linebacker or a middle linebacker, and I was just able to roam free very well. It didn't matter if they were an 80 speed or a 90 speed. You know, I was using what I can't pronounce his name. The guy out of Yale for Atlanta, number 54. It's like it starts with an F and then his last name starts with an O-L. I forgot how to.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
I don't want to screw it up, but he's a 90 speed, so I was able to kind of do a lot. But it didn't matter if I was using. I would use Patrick Queen, who they've got at like an 82 speed for Baltimore, and I was still able to do a lot of the same movement, that kind of thing. You know, I feel like if somebody hits me on a drag and they have the lead on that drag, I shouldn't be able to automatically catch up with them either. So there's a lot of stuff with that, like some of that realism.
So you're saying that the user didn't feel too slow?
No, and we shared some texts on that. Some of the more competitive style. Now I was playing in simulation mode too. I wasn't playing. I was playing it like what we would play in our league, that kind of thing. Yeah. And it's like, okay, that makes sense, right?
Well, you call it simulation. You call it simulation mode. I call it the right mode.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah, I and that's the reason why, like hearing some of the feedback from some of the guys that maybe I follow that are more competitive, and I kind of was looking and seeing what they were saying, and I was like, well, I'm not really experiencing that. Granted, I'm not at the competitive level of that, and I'm playing in a completely different mode. I expect something different. I expect more realism, is what I'm saying, and probably what you're agreeing with there in some of our texts is, a middle linebacker should not be able to do that unless they're like one of those outliers, like Deion Jones or a Devin White. Those are outliers. Miles Jack, who can actually match up with a wide receiver. Those are not the norm. That's where your superstars and your X factors should be kind of built upon, because they do have a unique skill set, that kind of thing. Your average player should not be able to do that. So,
right.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I think I've been one of the more, I do a lot of our tweeting on Twitter for our show, and I've been pretty vocal on Twitter about, like, I don't see this as a real issue, this usering issue. And look, fair enough. I don't play on comp mode. I don't play competitive Madden. I don't play MUT. I don't play tournaments. Don't do any of that, right? But I think in context, like when I looked at some of the stuff, I maybe was a little bit more direct on some of my feelings out there on Twitter, because I was watching the way some of these pro guys were approaching it. Anybody that disagreed with them on Twitter, they're calling them a bot. They're out there trying to get everybody to upvote it. They all said the exact same thing, which was every defensive player plays like Vita Vea. And I would be like, that's just absolutely not true. Well, you can say, look, you're playing in sim mode, they're playing in comp mode. But here's the thing. I think when we talk about those types of modes, first of all, this might be an unpopular opinion in the community. They shouldn't exist. You already have rookie, pro, all Madden. If you want the game to be easy, play it on rookie. If you want your linebacker to be able to cover every wide receiver, play it on rookie. Put your difficulty challenges stuff in there. Now you can say, well, it's not about difficulty, it's about play style. And okay, yeah, I can kind of see that argument, but why does the game not? Why are all the modes not realistic? Why have arcade mode, which would be unrealistic, and then have comp mode say this isn't realistic? When I think of comp mode, I think, well, it should be football, but without the injuries, right? Like it, to make it more and maybe less penalties. I don't know.
And the fatigue and stuff like that, maybe, yeah.
To put an emphasis on user control, and I think that's the goal, right? But should that mean that it doesn't play like football? I had a slight disagreement, and I didn't take it further because I just, out of respect, with Mills on Twitter about this, is like, he's like, comp mode isn't supposed to be realistic. Why the hell not? Why would it not be realistic? Look, this is the most publicized version of the game. This is where all the tournaments are taking place. This is what you're putting on ESPN. This is what you're doing to draw in new kids. Madden shouldn't be greater than football. Football should be greater than Madden. Madden should be trying to create football. That was the vision of John Madden when he agreed to put his name on it. So why have we gotten away from that? Personal opinion, get rid of those modes, make it sim mode, turn off injuries for these competitions, and stop letting them dictate that. Because I get the nuanced approach of, well, it can feel different in comp mode than it can in sim mode, but think about everything we want from this game. think about everything that this game doesn't do well. Think about how EA Tiburon drove games like NBA Live into the ground. They've been doing the same with Madden. I would bet that if there was a competitor for Madden, we might have gotten a delay on the game at some point, right? Because they would know they can't compete. And you're going to tell me that you trust the developers and the producers and the creative directors over at Tiburon to say, we can make a realistic mode and a comp mode because they're not doing that right now, right? So there's, for me, and this is a little bit off the topic, I think, but it applies directly to this beta feedback. Yeah. It applies directly to the beta feedback of like, oh, we want the game to play this way because this is how we do it in MUD. And I think one of the things that I said on Twitter, which I was pretty proud of, was, hey, if your linebacker's not fast enough, did you try putting a punter in there? Because maybe we'll get a quicker animation, right?
Trust way.
Yeah. Right?
Actually, I read that one. So I do read them a lot, even though I don't say anything hardly ever. I do occasionally say some stuff. Usually it's around draft time. But anyhow.
But the guy who won a Madden championship doing that is out here saying defenders don't play the way they should. I don't believe that you're trying to play the way you should. You're trying to win a championship. You're trying to find every exploit you can. And when the game doesn't let you exploit it the way it did last year, then now you have a problem with it. And you say it's a gameplay issue. It's not a gameplay issue. Adapt to how the game plays. Play football. So like when you and I are playing, so I'm out here playing, I can think of 2 or 3 times where I'm controlling a middle linebacker in the beta. And I've got Travis Kelce, right? Great tight end.
Who's
Great
really, really good. Yeah, probably the best tight end in the league. Yeah.
He has a little double move on me, and I break the wrong way, and I can't catch him. I'm done. To me, the way that feedback reads from the competitive side is that I should be able to catch back up to him after I make the mistake. It's like, no, you read the play wrong.
Yeah.
Well, I read it wrong at first, but then I tried to follow him on his second cut. You can't. Your players shouldn't be able to do that unless they are a freak athlete, and there aren't as many as you might think there are in the NFL, right? So, like, I would see that happen, and I'd get beat deep, or even, like, they'd run a streak route on me, and I would just be kind of lurking back thinking, okay, is he going to cut? And he never does. And then I react too slow to turn and chase him. And now he's wide open down the field on my cover 2, right? That's me making the wrong read using the player. I shouldn't be able to catch him. Kind of like you said there, when they run a drag route, Patrick Queen shouldn't necessarily be able to catch them off the bat, right? So, and something that you and I think talked about a little bit in our last episode, though, was the issue around, well, does gameplay allow that? Because, like, we talked about pass rush, and it's like, well, we lurk because people don't cover their zones.
Mm-hmm.
The AI doesn't play to their zones correctly. Well, then, if I can't catch him, can I trust that my corner is going to get him? And is my safety going to get him? Can I trust that that's going to play out the right way? And I think that's where, as players, we want to see, we don't want them to nerf it to make it so that I can do superhuman things. We want them to make it so that the players play correctly. But at the same time, everything should come into play there. My corner's awareness, his speed, what direction he was going when that play executes should impact whether or not he can get back to that player, whether I'm controlling him or not. And I think that's the thing, is these ratings should have to matter. Even in MUT, even in competitive mode, what's the point of grinding to build up a 99 overall card with all these different abilities if the ratings don't matter? And I think several people pointed out, some pro players actually pointed this out, like, guys, you're playing with reg teams. You're playing with out of the box teams, not your MUT team. You need to know that they can't do the same things that you were doing yesterday with your Madden 20 team. So it's like, you want to give the feedback, but just like the comp players don't want our feedback to overrule their feedback, we don't want their feedback to overrule ours. And I feel we're more in danger of losing that ground because our mode, our style doesn't make Madden money.
It doesn't. And we'll talk a lot about that in our final topic of the.
Yeah.
I
So
got
sorry.
lots that I could say.
I know I went a little bit off the script there, but that was
it,
something I've been thinking about. So
I think it's pretty relevant because you do have all these different, play styles. You have MUT, you have Ultimate Team, you have competitive. Like those are segments of it, that kind of thing of Madden. Um, and then you have franchise, and specifically a simulation. Like and not necessarily me speaking for Chad, but me speaking for Chad. Like he loves an arcade type style, right?
sure.
Like he's the one person in our league that like he would be completely okay with, changing that up because he doesn't use his depth chart. He just uses, his 90 plus players. That
Yeah,
kind of thing.
he's gotten
Like,
more
yeah,
nuanced about it. Yeah.
but he still builds them up and then has salary cap issues. But anyhow, um, like finding those tiers and everything like that. Like I knew, I'm in a beta, so some things are going to change and whatnot. I know that Patrick Queen is his speed's probably going to be probably around 85, not an 82, because he's actually a coverage linebacker. Okay, and they even say as much, with those that this is a beta build. These, especially for rookies, those stats are not set in stone. That kind of thing. So I already know that. But if I'm doing okay at 82, if they don't change certain things within the zone coverage and everything like that, I found covered 3 to be amazing on the back end.
Okay.
Okay. On the back end. So I was able to allow the outside coverage and that middle safety, typically free safety, to just do their thing. And then I can rove one side of the field or the middle or something like that. So there's some realism to that. Like they're not going to just, my corner wasn't just going to sit there and let it drift over his head to the receiver that's streaking down, like in Madden 20.
Right.
Everybody knows, like that happens way too often. um,
Yeah.
it just is what it is. I felt pretty good about it. I did feel like it's like what you're saying. The reason why what you're saying is relevant is change to the game. Like I'm gonna have to change my play style again, and that's fine. Like I
Yeah.
try to keep things fundamental and whatnot, of stuff that I want to do versus what the game's going to allow me to do. Like I pretty much haven't been able until some of the patches to be able to play my 3-3-5 like I have for years. I started out the year and it was terrible. 3-3-5 was terrible. Now it's fine. In Madden 20. So things like that. I should be gouged for a run or something like that against 3-3-5 or whatnot. So there's all these little different things of these nuances that I'm like, okay, well, how can I change this? I'm already trying to think of ways that I need to tweak my gameplay style because I like nickel and diming. I could do that all day.
Yeah.
As
That's
long as
true. You could do that all day.
yeah,
I've seen it.
yeah. I'm okay with a 14 play drive, but I'm also okay with a 1 play drive. Like I did find that those 1 play drives were just not as common in this beta. The only consistent wide receiver threat that I know could always get open, certain depending on certain coverages, was Tyreek Hill,
Oh, yeah.
and that's Tyreek Hill. Like you get him in the slot going against cover 3 or something like that, and you have a flood concept on one end, and he's able to do kind of this delayed post route. I mean, that's Tyreek Hill. He's delayed post really well in real life. So that's realistic. Um, I found somebody like, Brown, Marquise Brown, who's got a really good speed. It's just not the same. Like those couple points difference, I found the slot corner catching up to him, even though, Brown had him beat for 5 yards, that kind of thing. So I don't know if that's the quarterback or whatnot, and that's maybe me nitpicking, but I'm like, okay, well, the coverage, it snaps on at some point there. And because I would see it happen, and I'm like, oh crap, AJ Terrell is suddenly caught up with one of the fastest wide receivers in at least last year's game. That kind of so it's I don't know. We'll kind of see whenever the full version comes out. I think you'll find everybody's going to find a way to exploit some kind of deep coverage or something like that. That always happens every year. Madden 20 was terrible with it though, because it was just consistent in being able to exploit. Those should only be happening maybe 3-4 times a game tops for one team. Like maybe once for a team, and you got to capitalize on it. But again, I'm in simulation. So I guess everything that you kind of said plays to those things. I don't see anything wrong. I was still on topic. I'm trying.
As long as you're okay with what I have to say, that's all that matters, Nate. I never want to anger you.
Well, just don't forget about Ryan Tannehill here, okay?
Greatest QB to ever listen to our show. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of great QBs, Lamar Jackson is going to run over you in this game.
Oh my gosh! It's like he was a cheat mode in 20. He's a cheat mode in 21.
Yeah, and so I think the question though, Nate, is shouldn't he be? Like from a running standpoint, shouldn't he be?
From a running standpoint, yes. I did find, and this is overall, like drifting a quarterback outside the pocket in the beta 21, they're going to have inaccuracies, that kind of thing. I found if I'm outside the pocket, especially if I'm still slightly drifting or something like that, there was a lot more tendency to have an inaccurate throw. So they did cut down on that, at least for the beta, because that's what the difference is between like the beta 21 and Madden 20 is you get a guy with, outside dead eye, and they're on every time almost, that kind of thing with that. Whereas there was some portrayals. Now, sometimes I was like, the closest guy is 10 yards away from me, so I know I'm not feeling pressure. That, I'm setting my feet. It shouldn't go 5 yards beyond him, so there are some things that happen. Granted, it's Lamar Jackson, so, his outside the numbers are still. Anyhow. So, he's an MVP.
Don't tell Andre that, yeah.
Well, no, like I love Lamar Jackson. I thought he was great. I get to see enough Louisville college, and I was like, wow. But he's a dynamic runner in the right system, like which Baltimore had last year.
Yeah.
Like especially at the beginning of the year, man, they were on fire. But you can see that there's still some ways to grow. He's not Patrick Mahomes.
Right. From an accuracy standpoint, no. Yeah. But everything he does improves, like his other abilities improves his ability to throw the ball because he can run players open. He can do other things, right? But kind of in that same vein, you talked about like throwing on the run, doing things. I found animations in the game from a quarterback perspective to be a lot more pleasing, and they felt more natural. So like when I'm running and I throw on the run, like it didn't feel awkward. It didn't feel weird. The quarterback didn't always do some weird kind of spinning turn thing. And the throwing out of sacks made a difference as well. I saw several different outcomes from that. Now, when I was with Matt Ryan, throwing out a sack meant I was going to fumble it. And then Mahomes actually was able to throw a 30-yard pass out of a sack that was off target, but my receiver, I was able to use my receiver to come back and get it because it just kind of floated there a little bit too long, and I came over and got it as a receiver. So,
but you had to manually do on some of that
Right.
work too.
Right. It wasn't like a bullet pass to the guy. It was like, okay, he got it in that general direction, but it was pretty dangerous throw. And if I hadn't used that to make that work, it probably would have been incomplete, possibly intercepted. Right. So, so I felt like those animations played out really well. It definitely, like, you want to throw out of the sack, but then, like I said, certain quarterbacks are not going to do it well, and I think they're going to fumble more often in the pocket when they're getting sacked. If you're trying to throw out of those animations, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I didn't have a whole lot of those fumbles, which is a good thing. You know, it's kind of funny how like you experience some things that I don't necessarily experience, which is good. You know, like I'm used to having a little bit more mobile quarterback, so maybe that's something that I was kind of like, oh, I got to get rid of it, and because of the new speed up animations, and for the most part, I was getting rid of it a lot of times before I was truly feeling that pressure, I guess.
Yeah.
I did have a couple of long passes that did the wind up like in Madden 20, and I was like,
But I had
it was just a couple
too.
times, and I was like, well, no, he doesn't need to do that.
Yeah, I think that's an execution issue, right? Like in that situation, did he need a long windup? You know, and we might have one opinion, and the developers might have another. I think the reduced amount, though, adds to the realism of the game. Like, it's going to happen, but it shouldn't happen all the time. Now we would just like to see it happen at the right times, if that makes sense. You know, and that's the thing is I think you can't fault the devs at EA, Tiburon, for their concepts. A lot of times it's just the execution of them doesn't necessarily meet, gosh, I hate to say this, but a AAA title standard. You know,
Tim, I thought we agreed that there really wasn't going to be any negativity here.
I don't think that's negative.
I'm joking.
I'm just saying that they're terrible and they put out a terrible game. That's not negative. I'm just kidding. You know, I mean, joke's on me. I gave them my money, right? So.
Yeah. Overall, I thought I would have liked to have had some different teams, I guess. You know, like, I understand why they picked those 4 teams. Well, I guess except Atlanta. That's the only one I don't really understand.
My theory on that is Atlanta because of the new uniforms.
And that's what I was thinking. It was like either Rams or Atlanta.
Yeah.
I got to say that Todd Gurley did look good in that ATL uniform.
Oh yeah. So, I tore it up with Todd. That's for sure.
I both Tim and I actually were admitting a little bit, and me a little hesitantly, I guess, that Atlanta's uniforms in the game look actually pretty good. Like, it looks completely different than the presser, so we'll have to see how they look like in real life, whether it's this year or not. Who knows? But you know, like, I'm anxious to kind of see how that is. Now, the Rams ones are trash anyhow, but, you know, Atlanta ones.
Well, it's, you know, trash is what trash does, right? I mean, those guys are just, that team is just trash, not from a player perspective, but from an organizational perspective.
Just McVay, but that's the only one.
I did not use Atlanta at all in Madden 20. So one of the cool things that I thought was neat, I don't know if it's new to 21 or not, but I could choose whether or not the stadium was open. Was kind of cool if the dome was going to be open or not. You know, so there were little features like that I thought were cool. And you're right, I thought their jerseys did look pretty good in that game, but. I don't think we've talked about the pass rush mechanics yet.
I'm anxious to kind of hear yours because I guess I'll preface here a little bit and then maybe wrap back around. But after you say your points is, I still found myself using a linebacker most of the time. It's kind of been ingrained in me though for years and years and years to do linebacker. Um, so I was like, well, I'm going with what I know. I
Yes.
tried to do some of the pass rush stuff, but I just felt I still like they dumbed down. They made it to where the user really has to control the pass rush. I think, at least from a personal opinion, from what I experienced in a very small sample size,
Mhm.
is you have to have either X Factor superstars or superstars on that defensive line to make an impact still if you're going to be playing in another position. Um, Calais Campbell was just crazy for Baltimore in this,
Yeah.
like against the run and then putting pressure on the pass. I was like, wow, okay. And he's got Derek Wolf and Williams, I think, are the other guys, so they're a run stopping force, but Calais Campbell was still putting that pressure on. But I
Mhm.
found, like Tack McKinley, Grady Jarrett actually did a pretty good job, but Tack McKinley was almost non-existent in the pass rush.
I
Um,
had a I had a different experience with that.
oh, okay,
McKinley was my most effective pass rusher, and was all over the field. Actually, he was very effective for me in the games I played. Um, but I still feel like you're right. If you're not controlling the defensive line, at first glance, that was my thought too. Like, if I'm not controlling the defensive line, then and I don't have an X factor up there, they're not going to get any pressure, right?
mm-hmm.
But on the other side of that, um, when I struggled to actually control the pass rush too, because when I would go do the pass rush again, I think we mentioned it earlier, I didn't trust my players to play the right zones and to do the coverage. And the thing is, the quarterbacks are getting the ball out pretty quick.
Yeah,
Um, so when I was like the first couple times I'm running and I'm doing this pass rush and I'm using that defensive end or that tackle trying to get off the guard or whatever it is, kind of going back and forth. Um, First time I do it, I come in and I hit that left stick and I'm like, oh, he immediately got around his blocker, right? Like I actually saw him do the animation and response, not
mm-hmm.
like the previous games where I'd hit the button and it said that I won, but I'm still blocked, right? The problem was I still couldn't get to the quarterback. I still
Exactly.
couldn't I still couldn't get there. And just because I won the battle and got around the player technically didn't mean they didn't still impede my progress either. Where they'd still be backing up in those weird pocket formations that we see in Madden, and it would hinder my ability to be disengaged even though I won the move. And so my pass rushers could not get to the quarterback fast enough when I was usering. And some of that I think is I have to get better at that mechanic and doing that. But on the other side, like again, they're getting the ball out so fast. You've got these MVP caliber quarterbacks, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not using an X factor when I'm doing the pass rush. So even in that sense, I felt like maybe if I had an X factor or superstar that I could do a better pass rush, or my abilities would be more effective, or what have you. But depending on who I was playing against, like sometimes I'd be matched up against a superstar lineman, offensive lineman, and I couldn't, I didn't have an X factor that I was using to get around them. So, because I didn't do a lot as far as changing up formations and depth charts and things like that. I pretty much just played it straight vanilla at that in that aspect. And so I know there are other things that you could do, but I like the change. I don't think I felt as a whole though pass rush was not as effective as it was in Madden 20 when you're not usering, and it's
Mm-hmm.
still as ineffective when you are usering, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think gone are the days of I forget what Madden it was, but I remember being able to use a defensive tackle. Maybe this was like 20, not 20, but like 16
25.
or something, like somewhere between
Okay.
25 and 16, where you could use the defensive tackle or defensive end kind of in on the guard and just boom, beat them right inside and get
Mm-hmm.
a straight shot on that quarterback. And you could do that maybe 4 times a game with them. Where in like Madden 20, the majority of my sacks, well, all of my sacks, I'm rarely using them. There's a couple blitzes where I can make it happen, but not consistently. But it shouldn't be consistent. But for the most part, the computer is taking players I've developed to be good pass rushers and making that work for me while I lurk. And I feel like I'm going to end up playing 21 the same way. I don't think I'm going to suddenly change to playing as an edge rusher in the game.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I was really getting at is it's still not enough because I don't feel like I'm making the same impact. I may make that one move and but I'm still not getting to the quarterback. Because I was playing on All Pro and then All Madden. Most of the time I was actually playing on all Madden to kind of see what is the drastic change, that kind of thing. And then I switched down to All Pro. And still in All Madden, I wasn't getting that pressure before the quarterback is getting out the ball. You know, things are always going to change, but the initial impression is no, I'm still using a linebacker or a safety.
Right.
You know, and I make a bigger impact as a defensive player that way.
Yeah, it made me feel like I was wasting my defensive and defensive line's opportunity to get to the quarterback, because every time I would do a move, successful or not, if I didn't get to the quarterback, that lineman built up immunity to those moves, right?
Yep.
I also noticed too, like if I'm using a linebacker and they go into a running play and I get blocked, it goes into that move mode and you get the little counter above your linebacker or your safety or whoever it is, and they're trying to do to do a disengage. We would call it a pass rush move, but it's not. It's just a get past the lineman move, right, to get to the tackler. And I'll be like, oh man, this like running can actually take away your ability to pass rush in the game. And I guess that's, I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah. I noticed the same thing. I was like, why is it showing up? I'm using and I'm getting so close to the line, you know, filling one of those gaps. I'm like, why is it's acting like I'm going to be a pass rusher? You know, and if I engage, so then I would have to back off that player just to not engage, you know, because otherwise they're automatically going to engage with that guard typically, because those are the gaps that I'm going at, is directly at a guard rather than the tackle or whatnot. You know, and maybe they change that. Like that's some good feedback, that kind of thing, that hopefully they'll listen to on it, but we'll see.
We'll see. I think the last gameplay piece I had, and I don't know if you experienced this, I saw a few other people did, was lag on kicks. I had that happen consistently.
Like, did you lose the meter altogether?
I didn't lose the meter altogether, but like it would just pause and I'd be like, what's it doing? And then the next thing I know, it's all the way over here. I'm like, oh, and I messed up several big kicks that way.
I lost the meter two kicks in a row, one for the extra point and then the kickoff right after that. Wow. Meter's gone. And I'm like, I know, like, I can feel, you know, like, so I was doing I'm doing the actual motion here. Doing the left stick motion. I'm like, I can feel the sidelines over there, you know, or whatnot. And I'm like, but I have no kick meter. And I'm like, oh, it's definitely it, because I can kind of feel the animation that, oh, I've pushed the button. I don't know where I'm pushing it, but I push it and then push it. And, you know, yeah, it was interesting. Whenever that happened, I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. Hopefully that could be fixed. You know,
I hope so.
And it wasn't like it was game on the line either, which I thought was interesting too. I mean, it's beginning of the fourth quarter, tie ball game.
Yeah.
You know,
it's silly. It reminds me of something I think Clint said a long time ago, where they talked about like having wind socks in the game, and like getting the wind right in the game. And he would talk about how like they would have it right, but then the windsock wouldn't. They would change something, and now the windsock wouldn't work right, and that's why the windsock was taken out of the game. At one point, it's like, okay, and that's kind of what this reminds me of. Is it's like you've got these little mechanics because this is built on such old code that just
Yeah.
they can't figure out how to fix them or make them consistent because they keep just building on a terrible foundation, and that's unfortunate. I hope that
That
doesn't affect the game.
Yeah, I remember kicks being a big issue. What was it, 4 or 5 years ago? There was a big issue with the kicks at
I
one
think
point.
I think
I
it was
think
sooner than that. I think it was maybe
three.
2 years ago. It's like maybe Madden 19, where like the kick meter would disappear completely.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, that was the only other gameplay issue that I ran into. Um, the only other note I took on the beta was that presentation was awful. Um, like there were some aspects of it that were okay and good. Some of the replay stuff was, I mean, it was quality replay, but like the stuff they put on the screen was kind of silly. Like the they put weird catchphrases up there. I can't remember what some of them were now, but just strange things, for the graphics. But when the game kicks off, and it's like showing the stadium and the music's playing and it's doing all the cinematics and these guys are getting ready to come out of the tunnel, and then you get this really bland stadium announcer doing his best to like hype you up over the fact that Patrick Mahomes is going head to head with Tom Brady or Lamar Jackson, and it is the stadium announcer. If you play the game, and I like him as the stadium announcer, but as the guy introducing the game, it almost sounds like a faux NFL Films type thing, and it just doesn't work. It sounds awful, and every time I'm like, where's the coach? Like, he's annoying, but at least he has energy in his voice, right? And he's still there in their little, halftime show that didn't exist in the game because it was a beta. And so that's my hope, is that presentation, like, just wasn't a priority for the beta. They wanted your opinions on the gameplay, not the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to have all that recorded with the coach before the game starts. And they're going to have those half times more like they were in Madden 20. Not that it matters because I skip them all anyway. But my point is, don't put crap in there. Put the effort in there to make that presentation feel. It's not like it's just that immersion piece. It's like Tony Bruno was trending on Twitter because of the whole fixed Madden franchise thing, and some people, saw some different opinions on it. And people were like, well, did people really like the Tony Bruno show? Like, they really want Tony Bruno to come back? It's like, well, yes, people did like that, but I think what they liked more was the effort of creating immersion in the game, and that was the most innovative way that Madden had done it and has done it to date, was to do the Tony Bruno show for 3 years straight. So what people want is something innovative. They don't want a Twitter feed at the bottom with bad text writing, with just bad analysis. They want something that feels immersive, that their season, their franchise is realistic, and I think that's kind of thing. So presentation just was way off in there. But again, we knew it was a gameplay beta. We knew that there was no franchise mode. It's only 4 teams. And we know that the dev cycle's been weird this year because of the virus. So I feel like maybe they just didn't put it in the game because it's just, that wasn't the point of the beta.
Yeah, I think they kind of, like what you referred to as the fluff and everything like that. Like, there was no fluff really, hardly in it, other than some of the gameplay animations, I guess I would say. But that's something that they're also trying to highlight, is some of that, I'm glad that the coach wasn't at the beginning. I was like, okay, I can dull it down a little bit because it's a little too much energy after listening to him announce things wrong, San Diego or something like that.
I think they fixed that last year, but the year before that was bad. But if you waited for the halftime show, I kept wanting to check to see if anything was different with the halftime show because it was the beta, or if they'd fix anything. but I kept skipping it just out of habit. And I finally did it, and it was abbreviated, but he even made a comment in it about this not being a real halftime show. It was almost like they recorded the coach saying something about the fact that we're not actually doing a halftime show for this mode. And it was really kind of interesting. I hope they haven't put in all of their audio for the game yet, as far as updating play calling and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, they didn't have Gauden and Davis really in it, if I'm correct.
They were in it, but they were quiet a lot of times.
Yeah, they were really. Yeah, I mean, I'm okay. I like them. I love Charles Davis. Like, I think he's an awesome individual, like person, and then also announcer and everything like that. So, and Gauden and him kind of have worked pretty well together, I think, in the game. Maybe some different things on that, but I don't really focus too much on that stuff, I guess. I just want good gameplay, good franchise mode, stuff like that. That kind of thing. But
yeah. Well, you have any other thoughts about the beta that we haven't covered?
I was just glad that I was able to really participate and do it. It did feel a little bit different, and I was happy about that. I felt like I could run between the tackles a little bit differently in this version, which is good. Like, I'm not getting grabbed right off the bat or something like that. But I also did feel like sometimes the interior block shed was pretty high, especially whenever I was in on Madden. But a Grady Jarrett should be able to beat, that person occasionally or something like that. So it's there's some give and take, that kind of thing, kind of looking at it in the middle ground. But yeah, I'm good with it. Cool. We'll see. Hopefully it's a lot better than 20 was.
Yeah. Well, and I think that takes us to our next part here is the Fix Madden franchise, the hashtag on Twitter, the movement of Madden players that are asking for more in franchise mode. And like, we keep talking about what the game's going to play like when it comes out. We haven't talked about this personally, about like, I've given some serious consideration to not buying the game. And there's an effect. We are in a 6-person league. I thought about, well, what if we wait? What kind of things? And we haven't talked to the league about that or not, but I'm kind of leaning towards buying the game still at this stage, because I don't think a boycott is going to have the biggest effect that we think it's going to have. I think Juice Douglas, I think, said it pretty well, where he's like, well, you say if we don't buy the game, it's hitting them in their pocketbook, but they make $1 billion off of MUT. So if we're not going to spend the money, why cater to us? And is it going to have the right effect? Like, and that's the thing that we don't know. He wasn't saying it was going to be one way or another. We don't really know how they're going to do it, but it was really cool to see that Fix Madden franchise trended on Twitter, got all the way up to #1 in the U.S. at one point. We had a number of top YouTubers who were really pushing that together. And it was kind of cool, too, to see a number of guys that don't agree in the community, like, agreeing on this. And as much hate as it's not hate, but as much as I've kind of poked fun at the comp players and the MUT guys and some of those guys. And to be clear, when I say bad things about them, it's because I see them doing bad things, and I see how they're treating other people, and that just bothers me. But regardless, even these guys that think that every linebacker feels like Vita Vea are out there saying franchise deserves better. Like this, it's okay to do that. Even with some of them just 3 months ago were trashing franchise players for talking about things, and sim players for talking about things like legacy issues and all that kind of stuff. They've kind of turned a corner and said, like, Madden, you guys make enough money. You should be doing more with this mode of the game. There's nothing wrong with us asking for more.
I guess that's the biggest thing that I was really glad to kind of see, because some of the competitive guys, I was reading some of their tweets. They're like, hey, I'm this kind of player. you guys know, if you followed me or whatnot, I'm this kind of player. I'm competitive, blah, blah, blah. But enough is enough, really. Like, how many years? How many
Yeah,
years has franchise, like, I mean, what we're dealing with in the Gridiron notes is a patch.
it's a patch.
It's
Yeah.
a patch. And how many years, like,
Well,
of them patching it?
I think you can actually take that all the way down back to Madden 12 going to Madden 13.
Yeah.
And that is why we're here where we are today. It is how they approached Madden 13, and they've continued that approach. So Madden 12 was the last one that we had that had things like pro days and like different types of scouting opportunities as opposed to just spending scouting points. It was the last one where we had like training drills that you could run for individual players. You had player roles were a thing, which has kind of come back as like superstar abilities, but it was like you had player roles. You had coordinators in the game. You didn't hire a trainer, you hired a training organization. You just hired a scouting organization, not a scout. And when they went to Madden 13, they put an emphasis on saying, and this was direct from the producer at the time, they said, we want this to feel like your individual career as either a coach or a player, which is weird because they got rid of superstar mode and went with this, which had no immersion. The only thing that was immersive about it was you could put your face in the game, and you had the little Hall of Fame tracker and your points. I forget what they're called, but those points that you earn trophies off of now and accomplishments off of now. Based off what you do, and everything is weighted based off of your accomplishments, right? So that's what they added. And then Madden 25 comes back around, and they realized people were upset that they took out ownership concepts. So they added owner mode back to the game. And what it was they had changed it to connected careers. Madden 25 then became connected franchise, but the concept was still, if you played as an owner, you took on the role of that owner, and this is you, the owner. And it gave you back some of those options, but they were never really fleshed out. And if you look at Madden 25 and Madden 20, the options are identical. There's nothing that is different about playing as an owner in Madden 20 than there was in Madden 25. So we can see a 7-year period in which the focus was to try to create you're the coach, so staff is not an issue for you. Coaches don't necessarily hire the staff. Well, yeah, they do in real life. Sometimes they do, and there was just kind of this push for that. And in that time period, what did we see? We saw the introduction of what was it called? The story campaign. And that turned into Face of the Franchise QB1, right? And again, that's going to be back in Madden 21, where this focus is on creating narrative. Narrative can be really good. We've talked about that on our podcast before. Narrative can be really good, but for the past 7 years, all of their focus has been about trying to create your individual career experience in Madden, as opposed to creating a team building experience that we want out of a franchise mode. And so everything they've added since Madden 13 hasn't been an ad. It's been a new take on something that already existed in the game. They changed the way they do scouting. Okay, superstar. Okay, you say, well, superstars and X Factors. Well, superstars and X Factors is a new thing, but it's not. We already had player roles back in Madden 12, and it's not specific to franchise other than it's your development system, which your development system already existed, right? They changed the way you do scouting. Well, scouting already existed. They didn't make a new scouting. Oh, they gave you a draft board. I technically had a draft board. It just wasn't organized, right?
Yeah.
And we've talked about that before. It's crap.
It's still glitchy, push X.
Yeah, push X. Yeah. The only thing that's been added to franchise mode that was technically new since Madden 12 flipped over to Madden 13 and we started this connected franchise mode is the scenario engine.
Yeah. And that's just last year.
Yeah. They haven't really they haven't really talked about scenario engine this year, but I don't think it's out of the game. I think it's still in there. But the way you get the most out of scenario engine is to play QB1 phase of the franchise. Everything is geared that direction, right? So I think it's cool that we say, okay, everybody's saying fix Madden franchise, and we can see that in 7 years you've only added one thing to franchise mode, and that one thing is not geared towards what we want in franchise mode. So EA does what? EA responds to the movement, right? They send Sean Grady out, and I think a lot of people in the community see Sean Grady as the problem. Guess when Sean Grady started working on Madden? Madden 13.
Yeah.
You know, he was instrumental in the change of direction for Madden. He also helped create some of the newer versions of NBA Live, which again has been shelved. And when you look at the franchise modes in NBA Live, again, the focus over there for the last 2 versions that came out where he really made the impact was about, oh, it's your player that matters. It's not like there isn't really a franchise mode in NBA Live. Like it sucks. It's bad. It's worse than Madden.
It's terrible. Yeah.
So he comes out and he says, hey, look, we hear you. Obviously, we understand that you want more. It's not obvious, Sean. You know, and we're committed to talk about doing more in the game. That's what he said. He didn't say we were going to get more. He didn't say we're going to get more in Madden 21. He didn't say that they were wrong. They didn't apologize. They didn't do anything. He said, we can't tell you what we're working on, but we are talking about working on something, which is different than actually working on something, you know. And then you start finding out that the guys that work at the game, at the company that are supposed to be making a big improvement on franchise mode, have to hand key every contract, and it takes them several hours a day to do it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why guys like Andre can't impact franchise mode the way that. Also, maybe because he's not technically a developer, and he's spending way too much time messing up the ratings. But I digress. The point is, here's the response, and I'm like, cool. You said nothing.
Yeah. It was just it was an overall, oh, well, you know what? I'm going to try to cover my tush statement. Hey, we hear you, but that's it.
Yeah.
You know, and like, that's all that I could really, you know, give out right now at this point, that kind of thing, that we're going to talk about it. Yeah. Well, you know, yeah, sorry. I'm frustrated.
I'm right there with you. It's foolish because you already knew we wanted more.
Yep.
You told us for years. You told us last year, and I quote, we're committed to franchise mode and improving franchise mode. And I think what the community is realizing is that what they meant was they're committed to face of the franchise, that they're committed to creating a franchise mode that revolves around a story-based 2-hour experience that turns into what we know as classic franchise mode, that utilizes a scenario engine to try to create narrative for your specific player who can now be a QB, a halfback, or a wide receiver. And that's where everything is going. That's where everything that is where they put their eggs. That's the basket that they have those eggs in. And it makes you wonder, why is that the focus when you don't technically have a franchise mode in the game right now?
They're lumping franchise leagues and players in with their game mode. Uh-huh. And it's just
yeah. But you know what? We said that last year. When they introduced it, people were talking about, oh, they have a career mode, and you would see these videos from guys like Eric Brayweather. Look, much respect for those guys, but they got it wrong because they were like, oh, look, Madden's got a career mode. And I'm reading the same materials they are, and we're sitting there saying that no, what they created was a 2-hour playable, cinematic that turns into what we know as connected franchise mode, where you play as a player.
Yeah, that specific player, and that's it.
Right. And like, I had people saying, oh, no, they marketed it differently. Like, no, they did not. There was no, they call it QB1. They called it QB1, but they were referring to a 2-hour cinematic, not an entire career mode. You were still going to play that career mode the same way you would have if that cinematic didn't exist. The only thing that was different was you had these scenarios where instead of having faceless coordinators, you had the little girl from the hospital that cheered you on in the NCAA championship game, which is like, wow, that's uncomfortable. Texting you personally while you're in the locker room, asking you to get a win for her, right? And you're like, oh, okay, like, I see what you're trying to do here. There are some elements in there that made sense, some that didn't make sense, and I'm not knocking the idea of having a story mode or even having QB1. I think QB1 in face of the franchise wouldn't get the hate that it gets if you had a functioning franchise mode in the game, something that was deep for the rest of us, because you haven't built on that foundation of franchise mode. That other stuff is your window dressing. Like, that's a problem. That's why people don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even really play the QB1. I watched my wife play it, and that's it. Because I had played, with I forgot what they called it the year.
Long shot.
That's it. I had played that, and from watching her, I'm like, well, it's very similar. Doesn't help me out as a franchise first player. Doesn't really help me out. None of that is going to translate into what I want to do as a franchise player. And it's just a story mode that I don't necessarily need. All power, to people that want to do that. Like my wife, she enjoyed some of it, that kind of thing. But she even said, well, it's kind of like last year's. They tweaked some things here and there, that kind of thing. But,
Yeah. And I think that's why our expectations are low, that they're going to actually do anything in the next couple of years, right? If you look at what Rex Dixon said in 2017, everybody looks at Rex with like this, days of yesterday of when people cared. And it's like, look, Rex was a part of this game getting away from franchise mode to begin with. In 2017 on Twitter, he said franchise mode is fine. I mean, that's what he said. Franchise mode is fine. Now, maybe he was towing a company line, but that's what he was saying. And he said that directly to customers who were saying franchise mode needs more depth. He was like, franchise is fine. People love franchise mode the way it is. You had Michael Young last year saying, we're committed to it. You have Sean Grady now this year saying, we hear you. But there's just, the expectation right now is, no, you hear us, but you don't agree. I think that's where I'm at. Like, you hear what we're saying, but you disagree on what the correct direction for this franchise is, what the correct direction for Madden is. You want a direction that focuses on MUT and individual player agency and a story mode. And we want something that lets us control our favorite teams, that lets us customize those teams, that lets us customize our experience. And you've not put that in the game. And in fact, you took that, it existed, and you took it out of the game. And I think that's the other part.
Yeah.
Like, even if they get something that goes well, we don't have any reason to believe they'll keep
it. Yeah. I mean, it really just goes back to the foundation is weak, and it's crumbled, right?
Yeah.
The house right now, you can't build that expansion that's needed because the foundation can't support that. The terrain or what, that kind of thing. It's like yesterday, you had mentioned, like the guy having to, and we're talking about Andre as the guy having a hand key, a contract in there or whatnot. Well, why do you have to do that, right? That, the foundation, like the tool to be able to do that is not correct. You should be
Yeah.
able to, like, and I'm not a developer, but if it was developed right, you would be able to have, okay, well, we can have contracts go all the way up to this, and this is the code to be able to do that. And all we got to do is just like 2 minutes, copy and paste Patrick Mahomes' contract. Now, his is a little different than some, but,
Mhm.
like, let's say if it was dictated, such and such per year, that kind of thing.
Right.
Those kinds of contracts, dictated. Well, it's just pretty easy. You put the number, you put the annual. You could even build it into where it's front loaded or back loaded or mid loaded. Like it. We had that. Like
Yeah.
we've had stuff like that before. So
Right.
I guess that's my argument on that.
Yeah. And that kind of stuff exists in other games too, with
Yeah.
how they do contracts and how that stuff works. And again, I think we put this out there on Twitter once, but this might just be an opinion, but I think it's a correct one. Is as the consumer, we don't have to know how development works.
No.
We aren't responsible for understanding how difficult or how easy it is. If we see something on the market that is being done and you're over here creating something in that same market space, but you can't replicate what this other team is doing, like, don't tell me it's too hard. Don't tell me it's not that, oh, it's not possible. We can't do it. Somebody else can do it. Why can't you do it? And then the reasoning behind that is, are you not skilled enough? Um, I think the resource options, the whole we don't have the resources for it is BS. EA Tiburon has the resources to do what they want, period. It's not the direction that we're asked to go in. Okay, fair enough. At the same time, why does that prevent you from making the game good? Like, is the direction really to put out a bad game? There's just little things like that just don't make sense to me from a consumer standpoint, trying to look in on that. Now, I understand what it's like to maybe say have a job where your boss wants you to focus on one thing, but you feel like something else is more important. So you're spending a lot of time over here, but you know that this thing over here is still important. Well, how you get good at your job is finding a way to meet your company's expectations while meeting your own. And I think that's something that EA Tiburon, and I'm one of the few people I think that have said this. I don't see a lot of people in the community say this. Everybody's always like, don't put it on the developers. Don't put it on the developers. It's the higher ups at EA. It's not even the higher ups at EA. It's the producers at Tiburon. The issue is EA Tiburon, in my opinion. The issue is EA Tiburon. Their developers don't seem to be skilled enough. Their teams don't seem to be given enough resources to improve the game, and the direction of the producers there. It's a whole unit experience. Look, I think Clint, for the most part, seems like a good guy. I even like Andre for the most part, and even the valet. He's in, which is something we got to talk about. Is something we talked to him on Twitter. But like, I don't have anything against them as people, but they're not accomplishing it. Michael Young, I loved Michael Young's focus on trying to create narrative in the game, and I love that he's a St. Louis boy that used to root for the St. Louis Rams and loves the St. Louis Blues. I think that's awesome. I think that Madden needs to be taken away from EA Tiburon and given to a different studio, and I think that would improve the game. The question is, would that ever happen? And I just doubt it. I think your only other option is to really clean house there, put in new producers. EA, the parent company, needs to step in and say, guys running the studio, you're not doing a good enough job. We're going to clean house here, and I think that's what needs to happen. Because when I follow other game trends as well, and I look at what happened at BioWare, and I look at what happened at other studios, and what happens at THQ, and what happened at Ubisoft, and different things like that. And you look at it and you say, people say, oh, EA ruined BioWare by buying BioWare. It's like, no, EA exposed BioWare by buying BioWare. They gave them these expectations, and suddenly it became apparent that this company couldn't meet those expectations. within EA's umbrella because they had always had bad working conditions. That's a studio issue. That is an issue with BioWare, not an issue with EA. So we can hate EA as much as we want as this umbrella company. But a lot of times the issues are what's happening at that local level, what's happening at Tiburon, what's happening in Orlando. And I don't trust franchise to get fixed with that team. I just don't.
Yeah, and I've said it before, EA Tiburon, I usually, I guess for the past almost year, Madden 20 cycle, I'm like, I refer to it as EA Tiburons.
Yeah.
They are the developer of it under EA, that kind of thing. EA ultimately has that power.
Yeah.
Just like what you're alluding to. And I don't want anybody to lose their job. That's not my thing.
No, ideally, we just want them to change course.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's something that the top down needs to kind of be done. Like I'm sure that a lot of those individuals work hard or whatnot. I'm not questioning their skill level or anything like that, or anything like that. But the foundation is the piece. You get a producer or something like that. That is heading up this thing. So you have several of these different producers within this one game, right? Because you have all the different modes and everything like that. They need to get together. They need to agree. These are what we need to do. Franchise needs to have this. QB1 face of the franchise has to have this. Like those are foundational pieces. Well, what do we need to do to get there, right? Are we going to use code from 7 years ago? Because, come on. I mean, the games that you're talking about, so Grand Theft Auto, right, is a perfect example. Rockstar. It's a game that's still going. It's that old, right?
Yeah.
Well, you see people paying like their MUT, so they have stuff that they're still making money off of the game, but they're releasing all these other expansions for free.
Yeah.
Right? And it's still the same game. It's still the same code. It's not perfect by any means, but they're not also expecting you to spend money or, like anything like that. Like this is a game that comes out every year and it has exclusivity and it still has that for simulation football.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a whole nother issue. Sorry.
Oh.
Frustration, NFL. That kind of thing. It's one of those things. It's like, okay, well, win is win, right? When are we going to get the game totally scrapped from the foundation that it is right now to something that's actually going to show and be able to show improvement and be built upon for the next 7 years?
Yeah.
Like that. You're working, but you're not rebuilding it.
Yeah.
So
that was something they said when Madden 13 came out, was they created specifically an engine for franchise mode inside their thing. But other people have actually suggested, and I don't know how true this is, that the foundation of everything they're doing, the foundation of all of their Madden code, actually goes back to Madden 06.
Yeah.
Which is possibly the most divisive Madden, one of the worst Maddens ever made. And you read Rolling Stone did an article on just how bad that was, where they interviewed the producer of the game, and just like the trailer for it wasn't even what the game. And the developers got super pissed because at the time this fantastic trailer came out, they couldn't even get more than one player on the field. And that was a problem, right? And they're like, and here's this really awesome cinematic of Donovan McNabb throwing it to Owens downfield, right? And that is what supposedly we are built on right now.
Mm-hmm.
supposedly. At the very least, we know that we're built on what came out in 2013, but quite possibly it goes back another 7 years. It could be 14-year-old code at this point. And the big thing that happened at those junctures around Madden 13 and around Madden 06, updated gaming consoles. You know, they should be using these opportunities to create new code, to rebuild. When a new console is coming out, that is the time to rebuild the game, not to reuse things that didn't work in the past. And that's what they should be doing.
Yeah, it's like other developers, look at it from the perspective of, we've got this new console, we've got to maximize that new console for one thing. So building on the code that we already have isn't going to work. Like they have to build another game. So Halo, the original Halo, doesn't still exist as the original Halo. It's changed. Obviously, it was Bungie at that point, but it's changed. Like, so the next Xbox is going to have a different Halo that has a different foundation to it.
Yeah. That should be how they should be trying to figure that out. And we talk about it having, well, it's a yearly cycle on the same team, and I get that argument, but they only get 9 months to build the game. Well, in an interview with IGN this year, Sean Grady actually pointed out that the pass rush mechanic that's in Madden 21 was first developed over 2 years ago. Somebody on the team built that over 2 years ago, and it took them that long to put it in the game. He said because we weren't ready for it as a development team, right? Because they couldn't figure out how to make this thing work that was developed 2 years ago. So if you think about it, like a lot of the things that come out are planned several years in advance. Rex actually talked about how the producers, when they pitched Longshot, he wanted something else, and they chose Longshot as their thing. And then it was in development for 3 years, right? So like they don't necessarily develop the game a year at a time. They sell it a year at a time, but they develop it up to 3 years at a time. They put in these, how many times we hear about their 3-year plans, right? They have a 3-year development cycle on these games. And the thing is, franchise mode hasn't been developed in over 7 years. So again, I don't even look at that and say, oh, well, they only have a year to fix it. No, they don't. This game's been in development for over 30 years. This is just not, they're doing something wrong if they can't figure out how to make this work, because other companies make it work.
Yeah. 3 years is enough to, have a good foundation. If you have a team that's dedicated, for a development, so you have an R&D type team, right? They're doing research and development of that next whatever, like whatever engine it's going to work, on that kind of thing. I guess we're using Unreal Engine right now, and it was Ignite before that and stuff like
that. It's Frostbite.
But so it was Unreal before.
And then Ignite.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I'm getting them all. Like that engine, whatever you're using, you should have a team, hopefully it was 2 years ago at this point, already kind of developing new code for a new basis, right? On it, not importing that code or anything like that, or translating that code or whatnot. Something needs to be done there, and that's where it starts. Just having that allocated teams to do that.
Yeah.
You don't. Yeah.
Well, I feel like this is a thoroughly beaten dead horse at this point. I would like for EA to prove us wrong with Madden 21 and beyond. I would love to see some type of statement that says this is what's going to be patched into Madden 21. But remember, we've gotten lists about things that we're going to patch into Madden 20 that never happened. or that cause you to have to reset your franchise mode or whatever. So even that has its issues. I'd like to see a timeline on some of these things. I'd like to know that franchise mode 22 is going to have coordinators. It's going to have coaching carousel, that they're going to do stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I'll have to believe it when I see it, because EA keeps not proving it to us, right? Now, something I mentioned just a few minutes ago, talking about the guru, or the valet as I call them, ratings in Madden. Mm-hmm. They were talking about a new rating in Madden, change of direction, replaced elusiveness. Yep. And it translates to the defensive side of the ball, and is possibly the culprit for why some comp players don't feel like their players move the same way they did before, right? So they were trying to explain that on Twitter, and he was doing a really good breakdown of this is what COD is, this is what agility is, this is what this is. What elusiveness was, and I retweeted him and was like, "Hey, put this out there. Is there a, like a glossary somewhere that explains what all these do? Because this is really good info. Like, it's not often that I get to compliment the guru. So I wanted to take that opportunity." And
yeah, I read that, and he actually responded in a nice manner.
He responded, I was saying, "Hey, man, you're giving us really great info that we would love to have in the community." And he was like, "I've been working on something like that." And then Ford Verts actually responded to that and said that he interviewed Rex a couple of years ago and asked the same question. And Rex had said that that's a lot more complicated to do than maybe we understand, which again, it's literally saying this rating affects these things on the field. I don't understand why that's so difficult when you've been coding the game for how many years at this point, right? Like, I don't see that as a difficult thing, but whatever. Again, we're not developers, but I think but we're talking about just data correlation and talking about, hey, this equals this, and this equals this, and this equals this. So when you see a strength rating, this is what it impacts on the field. Things like that. And so it would be really cool if we see that drop sometime in the next year, or I would love to see something that really explains what the ratings are. And I was very happy to hear that a guy who works with the ratings, who's probably the most, for better or worse, the most powerful voice on the ratings team, who runs that ratings team, say, "I've been working on something like this for you." So we're really glad to have broken that story. No, but we're really glad that he's working on that. I think credit where credit's due. Hopefully that'll be out sometime.
Yeah, it was interesting because I've looked at some of those threads and everything like that on Twitter and whatnot. But what kind of goes, I'm trying to be positive about it, but like, obviously it's tough sometimes to do so. My worries is that, like, what they did with morale is now what did they change?
Well, yeah, it was confidence, and it became morale.
Exactly. All they did was just change the name of it.
That was all they did.
Like, and that's my worry is that, well, is this just another name change?
And from what they said, it seems like no. It seems like no, yeah. It's not. If it apparently has had a real impact, because people are talking about why their players move differently. Mm-hmm. So I think this has had a real impact. I feel like COD change of direction rating was a good move, and I like how it's been implemented in the game at this point.
And also, I guess the other thing is in reading that, how it affects offense and defense, which is a good thing. So, and that's the reason why I'm kind of along the same lines of you is I think it's an actual fundamental coding change rather than a name change. But I have my worries, because it is a beta and we don't know yet, that kind of thing. We haven't got our hands on the first product there, which will probably have a patch for day one. At this point, we probably already, or at least a week or two down the line, there we probably already know that that's going to happen because of the franchise matters. Franchise, yeah, you know what I mean. That kind of thing. A fixed franchise. That's it. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. We can talk negatively. We can talk positively. Whatever it is, it'll be. The nice thing though is that hopefully some impact was actually made, because they're cash cows. Basically the people that they're bigger kind of prestige, like they're players of it that actually make money, that make a living on the game. It's actually saying something about it. And you have a lot of these developers, not developers, but these the YouTube
content creators.
Deuce Douglas has been on his game on that. I've loved some of his stuff, but like giving some history stuff, and he said fix Madden franchise. It's just like, okay, completely out of left field, but I love some of the humor to that kind of thing. But he's not the only one, but you have a lot of these players, Eric Mayweather or Ray Weather. Basically he's like, hey, something's got to be done. And he's pretty connected to some of those guys, that kind of thing. So he's even saying it.
I do want to say about this game changers and stuff. I did see a little rhetoric out there on Twitter about people being mad at some of the game changers and calling them hypocrites, saying they didn't do something soon enough. They didn't. And I have found it very enlightening to watch guys like Sim F Ball Critic. So he's gotten some flack from some people in the community for not speaking up enough. But if you go back 3-4 years on his channel, he's always been pointing out issues with Madden. He's always been asking for more. And he shared a really interesting story about being a game changer the year they announced the long shot mode, where he was like, why? Like, you guys, like, there's a successful version of this in NBA 2K, and you guys are going a completely different direction, and you still don't have a franchise mode that addresses all these needs. And one of the things that's been consistent over the last few years is these game changers have provided lists, have talked to developers, have said this is what the community wants. You know what? Deuce Douglas was interviewed to work at EA Tiburon, but it didn't work for him, right? They know what we want as a community. So don't take your frustrations out on a game changer or another content creator who doesn't necessarily, unless it's a pro player who calls you a bot because you don't agree with them. Have at it. Tell him to go where he wants to. But
he could take his bot elsewhere.
Yeah, but if somebody is hashtagging Fix Madden Franchise, don't try to call them out. Don't try to police them. Let them call it out. Let them be a part of this voice, because we need every voice that we can get right now. And I think we need to be aligned as a community on this. We can disagree on things like the COD rating or our users too slow, things like that. We can disagree on that stuff, hopefully more politely than we have, but we need to believe that the game needs to be the best it can be for everybody involved. And I think that's where we can't do that. We can't call out these guys and say they didn't do enough. It wasn't their decision. They're not the ones in those rooms. It's not on the consumers who gave the feedback. It's on the people who didn't do anything with the feedback.
Yeah, I think that would you say that pretty much wraps it up?
Yeah,
I think that horse is dead by now.
Yeah. Or what is it? We're feeding an overfed horse. Is that how PETA says we should say it?
I have no idea. I don't. I don't really read a lot of their stuff. Who is this Peter? No, I'm just joking.
Oh yeah, I think that does do it. We've got an hour and a half here of us of well, me doing some ranting and you providing some quality feedback. So I think this works.
Okay, well, thank you for watching and listening, or listening and what, I don't know. To Tim, have his say on this kind of interesting version of the Nano Blitz and whatnot. But as always, it wouldn't be kind of a recording without. But what do we usually end with?
Play your game, Chad.
Yeah, play your game, Chad.